only by looking directly into the sun, into the brightest thing possible, into all of the mind, maybe, can you make the decision as to how you want to act. You have to fully see the darkness that we have come up with. We've come up with terrible, atrocious things in our minds. And we've come up with amazingly beautiful things. And, to make a informed decision as to how you want to act, to make a very informed decision, the more of this mental sunlight that you hold, including the dark stuff, the more you can act through integrity, the more you can authentically act, and act in a way that is sort of unstoppable. But I believe that values like goodness, truth, and beauty do win out, that there is an aspiration, a spark within this that ignites those. But that's something that you would have to come to yourself, and you would have to fully engage the darker sides of things, perhaps. It's like the intensity of the sun without any shielding can burn you up. But if you get sort of used to it a bit, if you acclimatize yourself, you can take a lot more of that heat, that radiant heat of sort of the mental sunlight. Maybe our bodies are never going to fully be able to take anything more than 3% of the intensity of the true sunlight. But, you acclimatize to as much as you are capable to make as informed decision as you can make, and as informed decision as a human can possibly, arguably, make at this particular time. And so that's what you're doing. You're getting more and more acclimatized to take on the mental radiant heat. Much in the way that, if you look historically at our ability to be objective observers and make object of what we consider to be God, it's evolved through time. And that's just, in that sense, the degree to which we're taking on that radiant heat of absolute understanding. In that sense that, our ability to maybe make object of emotions was in that way our God as something like Pan, as an objectification of the mother goddess. And, as the diversification of these emotions were made object, then you had a multiplicity of gods. Pan-psych, or, like the Hindi gods, there's many of them. And they kind of represent the almost archetypal or platonic forms of these emotions that transcend an individual's self. In that sense, they're trans-individual, and they're godly in that way to some degree. And the more acutely you could go into those archetypes, the more you were experiencing that beam of radiant light that shines into those emotions. And then similarly, in some sense, with making a god a singular individual, as most of the as all of the monotheistic religions did, many of the more modern religions, you are concretizing as a solar entity, as an individual being, the radiant sunlight, as we as objective observers are in some real sense. We're trying to make concrete an individual, as to what they would be like if they were encapsulating as much of that sunlight as possible, as they were taking in and emitting, being expressions of the highest sunlight that we can possibly conceive. And so it is with, in a certain sense, the objectification of all of that process. That whole process you can see yourself as part of, and in doing that, you're cutting up certain parts of the sunlight to allow it to shine more. In other words, you're seeing that spectrum moving, and you can interact and play into and enhance all of these different historical sort of evolutionary parts of this, solar light, this mental light that we have embodied, that we have taken in, values like goodness, truth, and beauty that we have imbibed to some degree. And as I was noting before, I think it does in the end, or not in the end, but as it moves forward, and you really do try to move into that and take the burns, the pain that's sort of associated with it. You can make it more obvious to yourself that this is a process that in some very real way is embodying values like goodness, truth, and beauty, despite the hardships, despite the highly, despite all the darkness around it.